In July of 2012, in a plain metal warehouse in rural Quebec, an inspector climbed a stack of steel barrels to do a routine count. Each barrel was supposed to hold 600 pounds of maple syrup. One of them shifted under his weight. It was empty. So was the next one. And the one after that. Thousands of barrels, drained and refilled with water, sitting in neat rows so nobody would notice. Someone had stolen nearly $18 million of maple syrup, 2,700 tons of it, gone. It is the largest theft ever investigated by Quebec's provincial police. Not a bank, not a jeweler, a syrup warehouse. Here's the part that should stop you. That warehouse was a strategic reserve, a government-backed stockpile of syrup, run like an oil reserve, holding back supply to control the price of a breakfast condiment. You picture a maple farm as a quaint cabin in the woods with a few buckets on some trees. It is one of the most tightly controlled commodity markets on the planet. To understand why anyone would steal $18 million of syrup, you have to understand what you would be buying. Let's open the books. Start with the trees, because the trees are the factory, and the factory takes decades to grow. You need sugar maples, a lot of them, ideally on a slope, so the sap lines run downhill on their own. A tree is not tappable until around 40 years old. You do not plant a sugar bush. You buy one somebody's grandfather left standing. Land itself is the cheap part. Equipment is what adds up. Modern operations run plastic tubing from every tree into a vacuum system, then feed it to a reverse osmosis machine that strips out most of the water, then boil the rest in a stainless evaporator. A serious setup runs a real bill on tubing, pumps, the osmosis unit, the evaporator, and the sugar house to hold it all. And the whole thing works a few weeks a year. Sap only runs in late winter, when nights drop below freezing and days climb above it. 4 to 6 weeks. Miss the window, or get a warm year, and the whole season is gone. Break even is about scale. To turn a real profit on thinner sap, you need around 3,500 taps in the ground. A lot of tubing and a lot of trees you did not plant and cannot rush. You are not buying a farm. You are buying a forest that pays you for 6 weeks, if the weather agrees. Sign for the sugar bush. And here is what comes with it. You inherit the ratio, and it is brutal. Roughly 40 gallons of sap make 1 single gallon of syrup. 40 to 1. Every pump and every pan you own exists to boil that ocean down to the one part that matters. You inherit the tree's schedule, not yours. They run when the temperature says run, on nights and weekends and holidays, then stop whether you are ready or not. You inherit the weather as your business partner. Canadian production fell about 40% in one bad year, 2023, purely on weather. Your output can nearly halve because March was warm. And if your trees sit in Quebec, you inherit something stranger than weather. You inherit a quota. Quebec runs a supply management system that tells producers how much syrup they are allowed to sell, like a taxi medallion controlling how many cabs work a city. The right to sell your syrup is itself an asset you must hold. That is what transfers. Now let's talk about what comes in. A syrup farm has more ways to sell than people expect, and the gap between them is enormous. Here they are, in order. Number 1, bulk. You sell barrels to a big packer who bottles it and ships it to grocery stores. In Vermont, in 2025, bulk ran around $24 a gallon. Almost 90% of Vermont syrup sells this way, in volume, at the lowest price per gallon there is. Number 2, wholesale. Buy your own jugs, bottle it yourself, sell to shops and restaurants. That moves you up to roughly $40 to $60 a gallon. More work, more packaging, more money per gallon. Number 3, retail. You sell direct, at the farm, at markets, online. That runs $80 to $120 a gallon. The same syrup that fetched $24 in bulk can bring over $100 poured into small bottles and handed to a customer. That spread, 24 to 120 is the entire game. Number 4. Agritourism. The sugar house in season, pancake breakfasts, tours, the gift shop. In Quebec, the cabane à sucre is a whole cultural industry. You are no longer selling syrup. You are selling a morning out. Number 5. Value added. Candy cream sugar, barrel aged. Each step of processing multiplies the price of the same sap. Now hold on to that first number, the bulk price, because it is not set by you, and it is barely set by the market. Canada produces about 80% of the world's maple syrup. Quebec alone produces roughly 3/4 of the entire global supply. Listen to that again. One province. 3/4 of the world. That kind of concentration is not a market. It is a cartel. And it behaves like one. A single organization, the Quebec Producers Federation, controls how much its members can sell, sets the quota, and runs that reserve to hold back surplus in fat years and release it in lean ones. The exact move OPEC makes with oil. So when you sell a barrel of syrup anywhere in North America, the price you get traces back to a decision made in Quebec about how much syrup the world is allowed to have this year. You are a price taker in a market somebody else steers. That is why a warehouse full of syrup was worth stealing. Here is the cost stack, and it is heavier than the cabin fantasy suggests. The land and the trees first, tying up serious money in a forest that earns for 6 weeks. Then the equipment. Vacuum tubing, a reverse osmosis machine, not cheap, and the thing that makes a modern operation viable. An evaporator, a sugar house. Then the running costs, and they bite. Energy to boil, whether wood, oil, or electricity, hours of high heat. Operating cost lands near $2 and change per tap. Every tap every year, and on 3,500 taps, that adds up fast. Labor for the short season. Tubing repair, because squirrels chew lines and storms bring down limbs. New taps and spouts each year. And the invisible one, your own time, unpaid, sprinting through a season that ignores your calendar. Stack it up, and the math is humbling. On a small operation, at bulk prices, the payback on your initial investment can run 7 to 13 years. That is not a business. It is a very long bet on the weather and on a price set in another country. Here is the structural trap, and it is a squeeze from both ends. Your costs are yours, and your price is somebody else's. You pay for the trees, the tubing, the osmosis machine, the fuel, the labor. All fixed, all local, all real. But the bulk price you sell into is set by weather you cannot control, and by a Quebec cartel managing global supply. You take all the cost risk and almost none of the price power. And the escape route, selling retail instead of bulk, is its own trap. Retail pays 3 to 5 times more per gallon. Yes, but now you are not a farmer. You are a shopkeeper. You need a storefront, a brand, a website, farmers market weekends, and the marketing to move bottles against 1,000 other small producers doing the same thing. The retail market is flooded. Everybody knows the money is in retail, which is exactly why retail is so crowded. So you can be a price taker in bulk, squeezed on margin, or you can fight for attention in retail, squeezed on time. Almost nobody gets to just tap trees and get rich. To understand the cartel, you need to know why it was built. For most of the 20th century, Quebec's maple farmers were small, scattered, and at the mercy of a handful of buyers. In fat years, buyers stocked up cheap. In lean years, they bought little. The farmers had no bargaining power and no floor under the price. The Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers had existed since 1966, mostly as an advocacy group. Then came 2001. A massive bumper crop, more than 8 million gallons, flooded the market and sent prices into freefall. Farmers watched a great year turn into a financial disaster because too much supply is its own kind of ruin. That crash changed everything. The Federation transformed itself from a lobby group into a marketing board with real teeth. It set quotas on how much each producer could sell. It built the global strategic reserve to absorb the surplus of the good years and release it in the bad ones, smoothing the price the way a central bank smooths money. Overproduce your quota, and your extra syrup goes into the reserve, and you are not paid for it until the Federation decides to sell it. One organization born from a price crash that now steadies the price of syrup for the entire planet. That reserve, born from the 2001 collapse, is the exact warehouse the thieves would later drain. The heist was not a random crime. It was the cartel's own design turned against it. Because the Federation held back so much syrup in that reserve, and because syrup stores for years and looks identical barrel to barrel, there sat a warehouse holding hundreds of millions of dollars in a liquid that never spoils and carries no serial number. A perfect target. The ringleader was a man the industry called a barrel roller, someone who moved syrup around the Federation's controls on the black market. Over parts of 2011 and 2012, the crew trucked full barrels out, drained them, and returned them filled with water. Roughly 9,500 barrels, merely $18 million. They sold it into Ontario, New Brunswick, and the United States, blended into legal supply, where it could never be traced. By the time an inspector felt a barrel shift under his boot, most was already gone. Only about a quarter was ever recovered. The ringleader was convicted of theft, fraud, and trafficking. 8 years in prison, and Canada's Supreme Court ordered him to pay a fine equal to the full value of what he stole, over $9 million, on top of the sentence. Here is the lesson for anyone buying in. The very system that protects the price, the quota, and the reserve is what turned syrup into something worth stealing by the truckload. The cartel that makes your barrel valuable also decides what it is worth and holds it in a warehouse a thief once emptied. So who actually makes this work? And many do, for generations. 4 habits show up over and over. 1. They skip the bulk trap and sell the story. The survivors do not fight for pennies in the barrel market. They bottle their own, build a brand, and capture the retail spread, the difference between $24 a gallon and over $100. 2. They turn the farm into a destination. Sugar house, the tours, the breakfasts, the gift shop. Agritourism sells the same syrup at the highest margin there is, with the customer standing in your own barn. 3. They stack the value ladder. Candy, cream, sugar, barrel-aged. Every extra step of processing multiplies what the same sap is worth. They treat the quota, or the weather, as the real asset. In Quebec, the survivors know the quota is worth as much as the trees. Outside it, they diversify hard, because a warm March can take 40% of the crop, and no bottle sells from sap that never ran. And under all 4, the same clarity. They know they are not really in the syrup business. Does this actually work? Let's run both years. A good year. Cold nights, warm days, a long clean season, and full trees. Sell most of it retail and value added at strong prices. Run the sugar house through the season, and a well-built farm clears a genuine profit and slowly pays down the forest and the iron. Once the equipment is paid off, that same crop becomes real money. And this is why families have tapped the same trees for a century. Bad year. March comes in warm. The freeze and thaw never settle, and the sap barely runs. Your crop falls by 1/3 or more, exactly as Canada's did in 2023. Your costs do not fall with it, because the trees, the tubing, and the loan payment do not care about the weather. And whatever you do, harvest. If you sell it bulk, prices into a number decided in Quebec. That is the year that ends the underprepared, and no amount of hard work fixes a warm March. So, here is the honest verdict. A maple farm is a decades-long investment in a forest that pays for a few weeks a year, at a price largely set by a foreign cartel, unless you do the hard, second job of selling it yourself. In a good year, debt-free, selling retail, it is a beautiful and real business. In a bad year, At bulk prices, it is a very expensive woodlot. That's the whole thing, and nobody puts it on the label. You are not buying a cabin in the woods. You are buying a forest that runs for 6 weeks, a boiling operation that turns 40 gallons into one, and a barrel whose price is decided by a cartel in another country. The trees were never the business. The barrel was, and someone else decides what it is worth.